Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Training and Technical Assistance College. A few housekeeping things for us before we start. Please do stay muted until the discussion at the end of the meeting. Feel free to use the chat box for comments and questions throughout the meeting. Captions are available through the live transcript button in your Zoom menu at the base of your screen. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted in the TTA Collaboration Portal. And now I welcome Kristen Mahoney to get us started.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for attending our TTA College. For many of you, you might already know Carlton Moore, who is our new director. Those of you who don't, you're in for a treat. Carlton comes to us from Ohio, where he served as the state administrating agent there. And I'm going to turn it over to him to make some welcoming remarks. Carlton?
Thank you so much, Kristen. I was having some technical difficulties, which I've had ever since I got to the federal government. I got to tell you, the equipment is much nicer at the federal level than it is at the state level. I should say it looks much nicer. I can at least pronounce the name of my television, but it doesn't always work quite the way you'd like it to work. So I was having just a little bit of trouble and literally got on right as Kristen was talking about me. So I'm glad to have a chance to be able to join all of you today. I've been looking forward to the opportunity to spend some time with you and to get to know you, to get to know all of you and hear about some of the work that you're doing in the field and ways that we can be better and that we can provide better assistance to the field. What I want to talk to you, though, a little bit about is kind of what my experience has been with TTA and what my expectations are. So as Kristen indicated, I was the head of the state administrating agency in Ohio for 17 years. In that time, I had the opportunity to work with all types of providers, as we had some incredibly important work that we were doing, all focused on the end user. And at the end of the day, the end user is the public. That's who we're doing this work for, whether it was we were trying to make them safer through some type of violence intervention strategy, or we were trying to help people work their way through a drug court or a reentry court, or trying to help veterans through a veterans court, or even trying to deflect people from the criminal justice system altogether up front, always with the focus of who are our customers, what are the outcomes we need, and what do we need to do to ensure that we are serving the public. And because that's what this is all about. It's all about serving the public. In those 17 years, and it's hard to say it was 17 years because it flew by in some ways. In some ways, it's like being married. I don't remember what life was like before, but at the same time, I can remember the day like it was yesterday. And so those 17 years flew by because for the most part, I was incredibly busy during that time. And I just got up every day and went to work to get the work done that we needed to get done. But there were really two events or two things I was involved in and engaged in those 17 years that really impacted me. One was Tamir Rice, the death of Tamir Rice, a young boy, a 12-year-old boy who was shot and killed in Cleveland, Ohio. And I got to know Tamir's family a little bit. I was kind of the person in state government designated to talk to and interact with Tamir's family. And so that taught me an awful lot of lessons. But the other thing was something that we called the Ohio Community Initiative to Reduce Violence. And that's OSERV, what we called it. So in Ohio, basically, every acronym has an O in front of it because that's as imaginative as we get, right? We just put an O in front of everything. So like NIBRS is OIBRS in Ohio, just to give you an idea. But the OSER project, the Ohio Community Initiative to Reduce Violence, was basically taking the focused return strategy developed in Boston and bringing it to communities all throughout the state. And actually learned about the strategy when I was in Baltimore. I went to my first ever NCJA forum in Baltimore, Maryland, in the summer of, I don't even remember what summer, maybe 2006. All I remember was about 105 degrees. But I learned about it, brought together a number of cities throughout Ohio, along with some community groups, just to have a discussion and just to have people learn about it. And then ultimately, we had one community that was ahead of everyone else, and we worked very closely with that community to implement the project and to learn what they were doing and to assist in ways that we could. And as I watched it unfold in that community, I was more and more committed to the fact that we needed to do this around the state. And so we did that. Not only did we implement in Cincinnati, but Dayton, Canton, Youngstown, Toledo. And it was incredible. It was incredible. We had an excellent TTA provider. And that was the single most important decision that I made related to that project, was who was going to be our TTA provider. And we picked an excellent one. And they were a true partner in our efforts. And they led many of our efforts as we shared with them the direction we wanted to go. And they shared with us their knowledge, expertise, experience, but also their passion and caring about the project. And the reason that that project sticks with me so much is because I watched in community after community as homicide rates dropped, as people who had not always worked very closely with their policing agency worked more closely. I watched as the Cincinnati Police Department was cheered as they went into a neighborhood where people felt like the police department didn't care about them. And suddenly they were cheered because they were taking away people who had negatively impacted and really victimized and held that community hostage for an awful long time. And I watched this take place in community after community with our partners right there along with us. I sat in on call-ins. I had conversations with community members. I sat and talked to violence interrupters with county officials, with city officials. And every step of the way was our partners sharing data with us, showing us where the impact was, and demonstrating the work was working. And that has become my expectation. Not that every single project that we're going to engage in saves lives, but that if that is your focus and you have the right strategy and the right partners and the right providers, that you can save lives, that you can save lives, that you can create and improve relationships where there has not been relationships in the past, that you can transform communities because people understand that the police are on their side and that they're on their side. And so all along the way, as I went through that project, it shaped the way that I see my expectations, not just for myself, for my staff, but for our partners, for the people who are delivering service, who are given resources to deliver service to the public. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, that's what this is all about. How can we make the public safer? And these are my expectations that exist today. I have high expectations for the folks at PJA. And it's an amazing, amazing team. But I have a high expectations for them. as I do for our partners, our TTA providers, those who we provide resources to, those in the field who have grants from BJA. I have very high expectations. And for people who are living up to those expectations and working as hard as they possibly can and recognizing the importance of this work, especially at the time that we sit in right now, where so many communities are impacted by rising crime rates and where our partners are trying to find ways to change the way their communities are being impacted negatively by crime. How could we not have high expectations of ourselves and every single partner along the way who has the responsibility of delivering these services to communities all across this country? And so those are my expectations of everyone who's involved and engaged. And that includes all of you, right? Those are my expectations for you. Now, the other part that are my expectations of ourselves is that we'll be there as good partners to provide information and resources and anything that we can do. But at the end of the day, we're all going to be held responsible. And we are needed today far more than probably any time throughout my career. And we're going to be responsible for delivering the best possible services, utilizing evidence-based and promising practices. And the reason why it's so important is not just because of the things that people are dealing with right now, not just because of the increases in violence, although that is the primary reason, but because if we don't get this right, there are other people whose ideas about what works in criminal justice are very, very different from ours. And while we have seen crime in this country go down for the better part of 30 years, and we are right now in a very small period where we have seen crime go up, we do not want to be in a position where all those lessons learned are just pushed aside. So we have to redouble our efforts, and we have to live up to the expectations that we have for ourselves, and most importantly, what we owe to the public. So I'm so pleased to have an opportunity to be here with you this afternoon. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you and working with you more closely. And certainly if you have any questions for me, I want you to know that my door is always open. And I want you to feel free to reach out to me. So looking forward to the rest of the afternoon, and it's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton. You're a tough act to follow, but we'll try and pick up where you left off along the area of expertise and service to the field. One of the things that we've been thinking about a lot at BJA is how we ensure that our subject matter experts are properly vetted, properly trained, that the environment in which you all work and train is inclusive, and that the information that you're offering to our stakeholders is evidence-based and is the best available knowledge that you're able to offer. So those are really important things that we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks and months, about how we ensure that our subject matter experts are up to speed, are staying current, that we're making new friends and identifying new people that we can bring into the fold, to new voices and new perspectives. One of the blessings of working with all of you is that we are very familiar with you, but I also sometimes worry that maybe we are going to the same people, and that we, so that's convenient. I do it, you do it, we all do it, but looking for new voices and looking for new expertise and new types of approaches towards delivering the training and technical assistance is really important to us. So a couple of other points that I wanted to raise. I wanted to do a shout out to AIR for their terrific work last month on the Second Chance Month, and to CNA for its work with last 2 days. We had the National Public Safety or the National Project Safe Neighborhoods Conference, and of course to the National Policing Institute for its launch of the Knowledge Lab. It is unique for and rare that BJA has 3 events of such prominence in such a short period of time, and we can't do these types of things for the field without you. So congratulations to those TA providers who helped us lift those big initiatives off. I can go into a little bit of the administrative things as well. One thing that I just wanted to raise with you is, as we are in the conference season, and Carleton has a huge appetite to get out there and engage with you all, attend your conferences and meetings, trainings, what have you. When you're submitting the requests for him to attend those things, try and be mindful of a specific date and time that you need him to speak. And because a lot of times we get requests for me or for him or for Amy, Amy Solomon to speak, that are like, we'd like you to come for 3 days, and so the easier you can help us deconflict all of these invitations by, giving us a date and a time specific. And of course, if we're able, we'll stay at the event as long as we possibly can. But it would be helpful if you could just triangulate that a bit for us. The other thing that we're going to do next week is I'm going to meet with your communications staff. And this is a new initiative that Michelle Martin and I are doing because we recognize that your communications staff, just flip to that slide, thank you, that your communications staff is a huge untapped collaborative resource for BJA. Your communication directors are working alongside your TA teams. They know where you guys are going. They know who you're working with. They know about new products and projects. And just like our team does, just like our communications team does. And it seems like there's a gap in communications between your communications team and Michelle Martin and our team. So I'm really looking forward to meeting your communications directors and learning more about the way they develop their outreach strategies to our stakeholders and to our grantees. The first meeting is going to be on May 26th. And if your team has not signed up yet, please email the address on the screen below so that you can get them the invitation and the meeting access information. I think it's going to be a really great community of practice to have our TA provider communications experts together. I really think it's going to be great. So I think those are my big points for today. I really appreciate, I love TTA College. I love being able to see you guys. And I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Wolf, who has some more admin and communication messages for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Hi, everybody. It's Elizabeth Wolf here. And I'm just going to talk really briefly about 508 compliance. And we always hear that floating around. You have a special condition on your awards. And, just as a historical perspective, this is from the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and Section 508 was updated in 1998, which dealt with electronic resources and technology that's developed with federal funds. And we've all heard it, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. But again, I think it's important to remind everybody about the requirements with it, especially how many projects that BJ oversees and how many products you guys are creating that are so valuable. We just want to ensure that everybody has access, including those with disabilities. So generally, you can go to the guidance. We have 508 compliance guidance for publications on our website. Right there's a link that you can use that goes right into it. And we have additional guidance that goes from the federal perspective on what you should be doing as a project using federal funds. We also encourage you to consider taking 508 compliance training and learning as much as possible, because it's not that hard once you get used to doing it, but there's just a few things that you need to be mindful of, such as making sure that your PDFs are compliant and how to fix issues if you're noticing them coming up and things like that. And there's also issues with particular software that's better for our needs than other ones. So Michelle Martin is going to be talking a lot more in depth about this with folks next week that Kristen just mentioned for. But just understanding some of the common issues that happen that we see include missing or inaccurate text for images. Maybe there's a chart or a graph or table that's not tagged correctly, not using the correct color contrast and things like that. So again, we'll get into more detail about this with your communications folks. But we just want to raise it up to everybody's attention and just remind you how important it is. So that is my 508 compliance. And the next slide is a reminder that we just went over with Kristen about the meeting next week on May 26th at 10 a.m. And if you have any questions about either 508 compliance or the meeting next week, again, please reach out to myself or Jessica Tolliver at ICF and NTAC to assist with that. All right, so we're going to dive into something more substantive, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Carrie Shelton and Scott Decker from the Center for Justice Research and Innovation, who are going to talk about how they evaluate the work that they do. Dr. Shelton?
Thank you very much. I'm Scott Decker. I'm pleased to be here with my colleague, Dr. Carrie Shelton, who is also a senior research scientist and with whom I work closely. We view the intersection of TTA and evaluation as being quite a close one that should be paid attention to really from the time a proposal for funding or assistance or support is written through the process of receiving it and implementing it. I think it's important to point out that there are a number of roles that are played in TTA evaluation. Sometimes it's a point of contact. Sometimes it's a reference to other work that's been done that's similar to what you're trying to do in your own jurisdiction and trying to match up another jurisdiction that may have faced similar problems and successes as what you're trying to overcome in the case of problems and to achieve, which is successes, and having the opportunity to broker relationships among your peers who either have done it or are trying to do it can be very useful. It was Kristen Mahoney mentioned earlier that it's conference season, and it seems that with Zoom and other forms of technology, many of those conferences are online, and that enables you to be at multiple conferences at the same time in ways that that often doesn't exist. So it's just a matter as simple as staying on track and staying briefed about what opportunities are out there is another function that TTA evaluation can provide. Also the case that there are some things we learn by doing evaluation work that if we do just straight TTA wouldn't arise for us. I think the goals and the measurement of goals is certainly one place where evaluation work has a much deeper, if you will, focus. And the example I like to use is the difference between outputs and outcomes. And often in TTA, we're more concerned with outputs, and evaluation, we're more concerned with outcomes. Recently attended a conference and detective told me that the most important thing was arrest. That was only the outcome measure worth paying attention to for people who worked in law enforcement. And I said, do you know if those arrests produced additional results like reductions in crime, like increased public safety? And he really had a hard time processing the difference between outputs and outcomes, clients served, and thinking about the work on individuals leaving prison and returning to the community, whether or not they succeed and whether or not they go months and years crime-free and employed and supporting their family and contributing to their community as well. And I think that evaluation focus leads us to ask additional questions beyond the questions of outputs. You may be familiar with the Kirkpatrick model. It's one that we attempt to use and follow in providing TTA and linking up evaluation to TTA. And it really, as the slide notes, states the importance of building relationships. If I make a cold call to a site and say, gee, are you following the best practices as we know them in responding to opiate problems, if that's the problem they're focused on? That's not a very useful kind of call, but a call in which the site makes it asking for TTA or what's available for TTA. That communication and that relationship building can lead to more trust, and more trust, as we know very well, can lead to better outcomes. We like this model because of the various steps, from reacting to what we've learned or what we're told, from learning more about it, from doing a deeper dive than to just what we may see in a news brief or in a quarterly report, to examining behavior. And then at level 4, and these are different sized slices of the pyramid, because more time is spent on levels 1 and 2 than 3 and 4. And that's what the pyramid slices reflect, is that working our way up to level 4. And we want to get there focused on results, outcomes, not only outputs, by working closely with sites, and sites feeling that they have a partner whom they can depend upon to provide additional information that would be useful to them that they may not have thought about on their own. I want to turn it over at this moment to my colleague, Dr. Shelton, who's going to take us through the next set of slides.
Great, thank you, Dr. Decker. So I want to talk a little bit today, and I first want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. I've been involved in the evaluation of the National Public Safety Partnership probably since about 2016, and it's been just such a wonderful project to work on, and very impactful. And it's a challenge to evaluate considering the approach of it. But as Dr. Decker mentioned, we've used this Kirkpatrick model to try to get from those outputs to outcomes and try to understand the impact that this program is having on the cities and counties that participate in it. So I've got a little slide here kind of about where we started. So, when we first started evaluating the National Public Safety Partnership, we were doing the standard TTA evaluation where you will, get an evaluation form after participating in a TTA, and it asks you to rate it, usually using a Likert scale and some areas for additional comments. We found that, a lot of the times we were only having, 1 and 2 people participate in a TTA, and it wasn't kind of translating to any sort of impact. So then we moved towards interviewing recipients. And I won't say we dropped the standard TTA feedback forms because they can be very helpful. I love that these new virtual platforms like we're on today with Zoom, they'll pop you up the they make it so easy, right, to get recipient feedback right away. So that's been super helpful. But we added, another layer of like actually talking and interviewing the recipients so that we can kind of delve deeper into those questions with them. And then, around 2017, we switched our evaluation approach again, and we started looking, in addition to those other things, at the process and the impact evaluation. So using the Kirkpatrick model to look at all those steps on the ladder. So not only what is the individual learning, how did they feel about the course, but did it change anything for them? Are they able to do their job better? Is it building capacity for a law enforcement agency? And then the final step, is it having an impact on, are there results? Is it having an impact on the agency? And then kind of where we are now is understanding that, each agency that we support is different. And what may be a huge success for one may not be for another. And so kind of understanding that and understanding and really developing these relationships, as was mentioned, they help you to kind of understand the local context, understand who you're trying to help in the agencies. And that's kind of where we're at now with evaluating the public safety partnership. So we're looking, when you're talking about impacts, we're looking at impacts on individuals, organizations, either parts or whole. As I mentioned, like we could be helping to build, crime analysis capacity. We could be helping to build, relationships between organizations or partnerships between criminal justice partners. We look at impacts on the community. How does the community perceive law enforcement? How are they interacting? And then, of course, the big end goal here is what we're trying to do is help reduce crime. So as I kind of mentioned in that where we started versus where we are now, I hit on a couple of these methods, but we're looking again at, feedback from recipients. We also look at feedback from our TTA teams, those folks that are working with these sites on a day-to-day basis that really know them well, kind of know where they started and can add a lot of context to their problems and to helping them work towards solutions. Another thing we found that was really important was that, if we do this feedback, pretty early, it takes time to implement change within an organization. And so we weren't seeing that much. We were hearing, oh yeah, we think it'll be helpful. But it took, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years. And that's why, BJ eventually consider, the National Public Safety Partnership, it's a 3-year program. So we're looking over those entire 3 years. And actually now we're starting to look past those 3 years to see long-term, how are we impacting these organizations? Part of this process also help as an assessment by our subject matter experts to try to understand where these agencies are starting. And so if we can understand the baseline where they're at, we can help progress them and know where they might need specific TTA. Another part of the process is helping the agencies come up with their own goals. So part of the public safety partnership is a strategic planning effort where strategic planning subject matter experts go into the agencies and help them develop goals and metrics for what they want to accomplish for their organization. So it's not only understanding the local context, it's letting them say, where would they like assistance and what do they think they really need? And then a couple other ways that we look at kind of the methods for evaluating, a lot of the times that the outcomes, especially in a large program like the National Public Safety Partnership, where they're having a ton of TTA and they're doing peer exchanges and they're working with partners and subject matter experts, is it's often hard to associate like a specific TTA with one outcome. So a lot of the times what we're doing is we're just listening to changes and organizational changes and impacts that are happening over a lot of time. And that's something a lot of people call outcome harvesting, where you're just kind of listening, understanding context, and looking for those changes. And then to share that information, we often produce case studies to talk about those best practices and talk about the change and share that information with communities. So I just wanted to put up this slide to kind of show how the evaluation fits into the whole process for the National Public Safety Partnership. So it's not just we're delivering TTA, it's first that assessment part where we're getting the baseline. We work with them to do the strategic planning. We figure out what customized TTA they might need, and then we evaluate it, and kind of looking at it throughout the whole process. And that evaluation is, again, informed by the assessments, that's the baseline information, the strategic planning, which is the goals of the organization, what specific TTA we've given them, and then we're looking for those outcomes. So of course, I'm sure many of you are kind of familiar with some of these challenges, and I've hit on a couple of them. But obviously identifying the right methods to use. We're using a multi-method, multi-mode approach to evaluating the National Public Safety Partnership, but also like what's the right metric? Adding that local context is important in understanding, what should we be measuring? What should we be looking for? When we were doing just the TTA feedback, low response rates to surveys is a really common problem. I mean, 30% response rate is like super great. So that's obviously, a challenge when you're trying to get feedback from organizations. As I mentioned, attributing impacts and outcomes to individual TTA resources can be challenging. TTA delivery doesn't exist in a vacuum, especially for the National Public Safety Partnership, where they're getting a lot of TTA. So you really have to understand the context, including the national context of where is the nation going in terms of crime rates and challenges. And a lot of the times we'll do comparisons between kind of where the nation is and where our public safety partnership sites are to kind of help us understand all of the things that might be impacting like crime rates and community perception of the organizations. Also, we wanted to look at both the process and impact evaluation because, process doesn't tell us the whole story. It doesn't always help to count beans. Like, Dr. Decker said, it's not always just about the arrest. It's like, what does it mean? And we also don't want to just look only at outcomes because, that impact outcome evaluation, it can be really hard to do. It can be really expensive. It's very complicated. And we wouldn't want to solely focus on that because there's lots of impact, the Public Safety Partnership and other programs within BJ like it are having, but we just haven't had enough time, or there are other, factors that are preventing it from actually showing a major decrease in crime rates. So I just wanted to end, with kind of a couple points about identifying the right metrics. So as I've, talked about a little bit, it's really important to understand and develop these relationships with the organizations that we're providing the TTA to, so we can identify the right metrics to measure, understand the context, support their needs, and then tailor our metrics and help them build their own metrics, right, to get them where they need to be in a way that's helpful. So I put up a couple of, kind of metrics that are examples of things we look for kind of in behavior, that third level, and results, that fourth level of evaluation. And those are our contact information if anyone has any questions for CNA. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Katerina Marzella at NTAC to talk about the Technical Assistance Reporting Portal.
Great, thank you so much. So now that we've kind of learned a little bit more, you all have had the chance to think about this idea of evaluating your TTA. I'm going to spend some time this afternoon talking about how you can actually capture all of that great work that you all are providing to the field in the BJA TTAR portal. Reporting is coming up very quickly. And so today we're just going to go over presenting your best data. This isn't going to be a 101 kind of how to use the portal training. There'll be an opportunity to do that a little bit later in June and July. But today, oops, let me progress the slide here. Today, what I really, again, wanted to focus on is just a reminder of what reporting deadlines are coming up, talking a little bit about how that data that you enter into the portal is used. We'll go over some common data mix-ups that we've seen just reviewing the last reporting period reports. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about what's coming up for resources and trainings. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat, and I'll try to get to them as we go through. And if not, we'll be able to get to them afterwards through email. So required reporting. So the current reporting period does end June 30th. And those reports, those semi-annual grant reports, need to be generated and certified in the BJA TTARP by July 30th. And so to actually complete that process, it's not just certifying it and generating that PDF, it's actually the process of going through, reviewing and updating your grant objectives if that's necessary, updating any TTAs or deliverables, whether they're completed, whether they're ongoing, whether they're planned for the next reporting period, making sure that that is all captured in the portal. And then lastly, if you have any completed TTA activities or deliverables, making sure that you have those performance metrics entered for those. So we always encourage folks, I know it's May and I said July 30th was the deadline, but it's going to come up faster than folks think. So just thinking ahead a little bit, take some time now to update the profile in the BJA TTARP. We will be reaching out to folks who had some incomplete reporting from the previous reporting period or were missing elements that need to be completed. And so making sure that you have the correct contact information and that it's up to date with especially the grantee users in the portal is going to be really key to make sure that you're not missing any information, any reminders, any corrections that are coming from us. And then of course, identifying who it is in your organization that's going to be entering the data, making sure you have all of the award activity captured in there, thinking ahead about what performance metric data you need to capture or make sure you include, and then reviewing the narrative questions and being prepared to answer those. So that portal, that the data that goes into the portal doesn't just sit there. It is used. We do use it a lot at the BJA level. The NTAC team actually takes it and aggregates it and uses it to show trends across the field to help BJA in their decision making and for them to have a sense of the work that you all are doing and the needs and you know what's happening in the field across the country. And then for grant managers, that report is used to identify areas of strength for you all or areas where additional support could be used. And then of course, the portal itself has a lot of functionality for you all to use and run reports for yourselves to be able to aggregate your own data and start to filter it and look at different factors and things for you to identify maybe in other reporting that you do to use in your organization as well. And so if you want to learn more about how to do that, I'll have my contact information at the end of the slide, but you can always reach out to me and I can talk you through that. So just a few things that we saw in the last reporting period that I wanted to touch on today. The first thing is distinguishing between deliverables and TTAs, thinking about the correct number of entries to include when you're entering your award activity, making sure that you're actually including activities that are ongoing and you know, ensuring that even though it hasn't been completed, that you're still capturing that ongoing work that's happening towards achieving your award objectives. And then lastly, entering performance metrics. So instead of going through these one by one, I'm going to start with just a broad overview of activities and deliverables. And then we'll go through an example and you all will get to have some interaction to kind of work through some of these common things that we saw in the last reporting period. So at its basics, there are two different main categories for entering data into the portal. The first type is deliverables, and these are your let's think about like tangible, which is kind of weird because a lot of them are, you know, virtual. So you can't really hold them in your hands, but they're like as tangible as an electronic resource can be, reusable kind of artifacts. So your recorded webinars, any website work, podcasts, curriculums, things like that are all considered deliverables. Whereas TTA activities or events or trainings or you know, instances of targeted support, so your technical assistance that you're providing to different folks in the field. So like I said, we have an example. And so the example is an agency that I totally made up. It's called Criminal Justice Support Services. So in our scenario, they have an award to implement a new evidence-based practice in several different law enforcement jurisdictions across the country for 3 years. And they provide training and technical assistance. So in the next slides, I'm going to have questions relating to their data entry. And then you all are going to see a poll pop up on your screen for you all to answer some questions about how they would capture the work that they're doing in the portal. And so you'll just be able to select on the answer and then we'll show the results. So if first question. Oops. Oop, 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 oop. Okay, that was an easy one. We gave it away, but we'll count that as a warm-up. So Criminal Justice Support Services provides an implementing best practices training at 3 of their grantee sites. So the first question is this a TTA activity or a deliverable? How would they track that into the portal? So you all should see a poll pop up on your slide, and we'll give folks just a minute to answer, and then we'll show the results. If you're having trouble accessing the poll, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll work with you to resolve it. But I see the answers coming in. Okay. Kiana, can you show the results? Great. So it's actually a TTA activity. So this is a training that they're putting on. It's a one-time thing. And so it would be counted as a TTA deliverable in the portal. So for this particular TTA activity, how many different entries would Criminal Justice Support Services need to enter into the portal? You have a couple of options here. Would it be 1 entry, 2 entries, 3 entries, 4 entries, 5 entries? Folks can go ahead and select the one that they think is correct. All right. Okay, Kiana, can you go ahead and show the poll responses? All right, so it's actually 3, and it looks like a lot of you were right on par with that. So 1 entry for each separate training that you completed. And then some performance metrics that you could consider entering the number of different agencies that attended the training, or if you are doing any kind of evaluation, you know, asking a question about knowledge increase and then reporting back how many participants in that evaluation that you administered said they had an increase in knowledge. All right, that was the easy one. Maybe we'll get a little bit trickier here with the next one. Let's see, it's taking a minute to advance the slide. All right, so the implementing best practices training is recorded and it's posted on the website for the 2 other grantee sites to use. Would this be an example of a TTA activity or a deliverable? Okay. Kiana, can you go ahead and show the results? So it looks like everybody, I didn't really trick anyone with this one, but it is a deliverable. So it is something, it's recorded, and so it is reusable. You're posting it to the website, and so that would be tracked as a deliverable. And then the next question would be, how many entries would this be into the portal? How many different ways would you need to report out on this? So the options are 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Give folks a minute to answer here. Okay, Kiana, can you go ahead and show the results? Okay, so you all, a lot of you got that. So it's going to be 1 entry. So it is just 1 thing that you're posting, even though you know that multiple people are going to use it. You're only going to enter that once into the portal. And then again, thinking about some of the performance metrics you can include, the number of agencies, or thinking about the distribution or the target audience and reporting out on that. Okay, so Criminal Justice Support Services has a weekly check-in with each of its 5 sites to coordinate project activities and troubleshoot activities. Is that a TTA activity or a deliverable? Okay, give folks another minute. All right, Kiana, go ahead and show the results. So again, you all are moving right ahead. It is a TTA activity. It is technical assistance, and so that's how it's counted. Okay, now how many entries would this be into the portal? So they have a weekly check-in with each of its 5 sites. So your options are 1, 5, 26 entries, which would be 1 entry per week, or 130, which would be 1 entry per site per week. Give folks a few more minutes. Okay, Kiana, can you go ahead and show the results? Yeah, so this one would be 5 entries. So even though you're meeting with these folks once a week, you're going to capture that only once for each site into the portal. And so you could include for the performance metrics, again, the number of agencies, if you're doing some kind of evaluation with the sites that you're providing TTA to, including how many folks felt the assistance was provided in a timely manner. And here you have the option for all performance metrics to include a narrative. So here's where you can capture, even though you only have one entry, you can say this is how many times we met, or any other details about the meeting can be captured in that narrative that can really provide that rich detail and that context to the services that you're providing and capturing. Okay, last one here, or we'll skip ahead actually from this one. We'll go to the last one. We're a little short on time. Okay. Criminal Justice Support Services tweets out a copy of its quarterly report and shares it on LinkedIn. Is this a deliverable, a TTA activity, or none of the above? All right. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I think I finally got you all. So it is actually neither a TTA or a deliverable. It's a performance metric. So there currently isn't an entry for the social media, but if that's something you'd like to see, you can certainly let us know. But it could be included in your narrative for your deliverable. So the report would be a deliverable. And then in the narrative, you could provide information about, if you tweeted it out, how many views it got or shares, or how many reactions it received as part of that. So that's my little exercise. There's a lot of resources available to folks if any of these were new to you or things that you weren't aware of. Just a few other things to hit on. Some common questions that we got last reporting period, don't forget, if you make a mistake entering a TTA activity or deliverable, make sure you're entering it as canceled. That won't show up on your report, but that's, how you can make sure that you're, fixing any errors into the entry. The import tool is available on the website. If that's something you're going to be using, there is a template for you to download, and just follow that template really closely. It is a little picky with the way that the data comes into the system, so make sure you're following the instructions there. And again, reaching out if you're having any issues or you want a tutorial on how to use that import tool. And then if you do get an error when you click certify for your semi-annual grant report, it's okay. It happens a lot. You just need to clear out your browser history and your cookies and then try resubmitting, and that should fix the problem. So we have a few things coming up. So the BJA TTA Collaboration Group is a resource on the website that provides a lot of how-to guides and resources for how to navigate the portal. If you go onto the portal, it's under TTA Collaboration Portal, and then it's on that left-hand side under interest groups all the way down at the bottom. You can click there. It's going to be getting a facelift in the next month with some new and updated resources for you all. And then in addition to that, we'll be rolling out some trainings to prepare folks for the semi-annual grant reporting. So there'll be one on June 28th. If you or anyone in your staff needs a refresher, feel free to direct them towards this training. We'll be sending out the registration link in the follow-up email. I'll have office hours in July. So if you want to come in and if you're having questions, if you have questions or you're having issues with submitting anything into the portal, I'll be available to answer anything in those office hours. And then there's always one-on-one coaching. So if you want to set up a time to meet with me for half an hour on any questions you have, or you want me to come in and do a training for your staff, just reach out. Let me show my contact information here, either to my email address or the BJA NTAC address, and we'll set up a time and be able to walk you all through that. But I'm looking forward to working with everyone as we get through this semi-annual grant reporting period. And I'm going to turn things over to Judge Friedman.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That was great. Hi, everyone. As many of you know, I'm Karen Friedman. I was the one who forced you guys to have conversation last time on our last TTA College, and I plan on doing that again shortly. However, for now, I want to tell you a little bit about what else I'm doing besides for forcing people to have conversation. Actually, it's really a continuation of me forcing people to have conversation. So as you could see, my title is pretty long. And so when I joined BJA, I really had to think about where I wanted to jump in and take a bite out of something. So I really focused on the word engagement. And as I explored what BJA was doing, I really felt like we were doing such a great job engaging with states and cities and municipalities and TTA providers. But what I found that wasn't happening as much was engagement with the little guy, engagement with the organizations on the ground that are day in and day out doing the work. And they some of them may have gotten federal money through their SAAs, or some of them may have never gotten any federal funding or even know how to go about getting federal funding. So I really wanted to engage with those organizations and just hear from them what's going on the ground, hear from them about whether they know about federal funding, whether they even know what an SAA is, what their needs are. And I started doing that project, and it's interesting because many of them actually talked about TTA and talked about their need for TTA. So what my plan is to try to engage with as many organizations as possible and gather the information about what they're looking for, what they would need. If it is TTA, what type of TTA are they looking for? And how can we get involved with these community grassroots organizations? So what I'm asking of you all today is twofold. One is to identify if you know of any such organizations, either in your work or through your personal involvement in the community, that know organizations on the ground that are doing good work in the criminal justice arena. And the scope of activities that I'm talking about is very broad. It could be anything from doing prevention work on the ground to doing reentry work on the ground. It could be providing mental health services for reentering citizens. It could be providing drug treatment to returning citizens. It could be providing vocational training, job placement, GED courses. It could be, and again, the preventive stuff as well, programs, before people get involved in the system, but trying to basically help people that are affected by the criminal justice system. So if you know of any such organizations, again, either through your work or through your personal knowledge, I would love, my email address is right there on the screen, and I would love to hear from you. And let me know, let me know the name of the organization. If you know who runs it, great. You know their email, great. Or I could look it up, and let me know that you think that this is an organization that's doing really good work in the community, and that I should reach out and talk to them, and I will. The other thing that I was going to ask you for is I am basically going to be compiling a list of questions that I want to ask these organizations. So if there are questions from your perspective that you would like to know, that would be helpful to you in your practice and that you're curious about, please let me know. And I would be very happy to include those questions in the questions that I am asking. So if, it could be again, I'm keeping it pretty broad. Whatever questions that you would be interested in from a TTA provider standpoint, would you like to know from these little community organizations? Please submit those questions to me as well at the email address, and I will be happy to include them and let you know the results once I'm finished this project and compile the results. So again, just asking for your help to 1, identify organizations, and 2, identify any questions that you may like for me to ask on your behalf and get you the responses. All right, so that's all I wanted to say about the listening sessions. Now we're going to jump to the roundtable discussion. And we have on the screen, you could see the 3 suggested questions, but I also know that we've had some really interesting speakers and you may have questions for those speakers. So if that's the case, I could definitely give you an opportunity to address a speaker directly with your question, or we could jump to the discussion questions, which you see is, in what creative ways is your organization using data? How is your organization using your reported data elsewhere? And how does your organization define success of an engagement? And I would really appreciate if people would turn their screens, they're on, so I could see who I'm talking to and we could have a discussion. I think everyone, the feedback I got was that everyone really found our conversation last time really interesting and useful. So I would love to make some productive use of this time as well. So with that being said, anyone first want to start with any questions for our previous speakers? You could either raise your hand on the screen. Anyone, any questions for any of our speakers? Okay. Well, then we will go to some of the questions. I don't see any hands raised. Okay, so let's start with the first question. In what creative ways is your organization using data? And I am just going to have to call on someone. Miss Fernandez. Christina?
Hi.
Hi, sorry, you had a look of dread on your face, but I went for it anyway.
You caught me dead dread.
I feel free to answer any of the questions, or is there anything you want to share with us?
Oh goodness, they're broad and it's a pretty big organization. That's interesting. Well, I guess I'm going to give the example for how does our organization define success of an engagement.
Love it.
We have a massive violence advisory initiative that we stood up last year, and we've been reaching out to police leaders following a mass violence incident in their community. And it's been a bit of a challenge to get a response, only because they're in the midst of the most horrific situation that a law enforcement agency could possibly be in the middle of. They're pulled in a million different directions. They're trying to contain the scene, protect their community, answer victims and families and loved ones, and keep track of their own personnel, work with our first responders. There's just so much happening, and it's been very difficult to kind of get in front of them and get a response sometimes. So for us, we originally were looking at success as deploying our subject matter experts to one of these scenes and providing them with assistance and support. And we've kind of had to shift the way we looked at it a little bit to look at success as being just engaging with them, letting them know what resources we have available, and giving them that comfort and that support that we're here and we're able to assist them should something happen, and getting a response back of acknowledgement. So we had to sort of shift the way we looked at success, and because success isn't going to look like what we originally thought it might look like. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question.
I think that's great, because I think that flexibility is really key, because unfortunately it's not going to always look, success is not going to always look the way you foresaw it look, that you thought it was going to look like, and when you plan it, it's supposed to end in a certain result. And I think that that ends up being, you end up being very disappointed and frustrated if you can't kind of bounce back from that and really remain flexible in how you define your success. So I think that the fact that you were able to do that is great. And I think that's actually a really great piece of advice for everyone, because I think, especially now, I think things are changing a lot, post-pandemic, or I guess post-pandemic. I don't know if it's actually post-pandemic, but seemingly post-pandemic, I think there have been a lot of changes, and I think things are almost changing daily. So I think that level of flexibility in how you define success is going to be really important going forward. So thank you, Ms. Fernandez. You did a great job, even though you dreaded it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to volunteer before I call on someone?
Hi, my name's Maura. I'm from CJI. And so we use data in a lot of different ways in our organization. And I would say one of the, the primary reasons we use data is to understand what's driving a state's prison population growth. And so what has been really interesting to see is over the years, kind of the breadth of that inquiry has expanded. We do a lot more analysis now on folks and changes with folks who have behavioral health needs, as well as the impact on demographics. And so it's just been really excited to see how, the type of information people are interested in has expanded, and what state leaders are now, factoring into their decision making, which they didn't really do so before. So that's been really exciting.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Maura. Who else? I have here a question from Nicole Jarrett. Do we have tips on how to ensure that evaluations are culturally inclusive? Nicole, you want to just elaborate a little bit on that question?
Yes, sure, no problem. My name is Nicole Jarrett. I'm with the Council State Government's Justice Center. And, kind of from the very first introduction, when we were talking that the director made around the importance of this time and how do we become more inclusive, how do we make sure that we're not doing harm, I think that's not just in our technical assistance, but also the way that we're thinking about evaluation. What are we sharing to sites around how they should be thinking about the information that they're collected? How do we think about our own performance as well? And so since that was part of the conversation earlier around different ways that we can approach our TA and be relationship based, I thought maybe it'd be worthwhile to think about how can we maybe share some ideas on how to layer the relationship piece with also making sure that we are being inclusive and not doing harm and not carrying on the way that, same old, but making sure that we're moving the conversation and leading to perhaps more rich findings and things that can actually inform programs around planning and implementation. So maybe we can see better outcomes that lead to better, less disparities.
Great. Anyone want to jump in with that? Any of our speakers wanted to, or Kristen, anyone wanted to jump in that conversation? Any thoughts from Katrina or Scott?
Sure, I think it's a good question, but more than that, I think it's a principle that any intervention, any program, any relationship, any study ought to have front and center. It ought to include people first language so that the kinds of pejorative terms that have been used in the past no longer, and the connotations that they include and come with no longer be used. I think there needs to be real community involvement. It's pretty easy to develop a survey or do a few focus groups and kind of declare victory and move on. But the extent to which both members of the affected community, so if we think about reentry, where are the individuals who are leaving prison going to live? How do the people in that community interact with such individuals? How do those individuals have the chance of maximizing their success? Having diverse staffs is also a challenge that needs to be met and met successfully. And I feel strongly as well that individuals who've been subject to criminal justice control ought to be heard about what worked for them, what didn't work for them, why they see it that way, what they see as their strengths, and how we can maximize those strengths. So I think there's things to be done at a macro level within society, but there's also things that can be done at a lower micro level. And
Go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to say thank you for that. And I think this is where you have to be super explicit. And so we probably won't spend a lot of time getting into, we don't have a lot of time to get into specifics right now, but I think internally being really clear about the populations that you want more information on and making sure that they're being included in the evaluations. So for example, we have there's a project we have right now. We have the advisory group, people with lived experience, really emphasizing how racially segregated, even how behind the walls things can be. So even when you're looking for participants to participate in a focus group and it's not randomized, how there can be dynamics that you're not necessarily aware of that come into play, who even shows up in those situations. So I think it's up to us to be really explicit about who we need to be in the room, who needs, who should be showing up in these conversations, who's showing up for who has access to trainings, for example. So I think there's, it's worth a very kind of detailed conversation so that we can really elevate ourselves along the way, from pre-release to post-release, talking about Black populations, Latino populations, Native populations, getting really clear about how do we set expectations, making sure it aligns with what BJ is expecting. What are some of the assumptions that we're putting into our questions? Because there are assumptions. And so I think there's a lot to unpack here. So I really appreciate the evaluation conversation, but we can talk about equity, but we are going to further the problem if we mention equity, but we don't change the way we approach the work.
Scott, did you want to respond to that, or just?
Where do I sign up?
Yeah.
I agree. So also, kudos to CSG. I believe your research director is Dr. Jessica Sanders.
Yep.
I had the privilege of working with her for her first job out of graduate school. She had never had a car and moved to Phoenix from New York and figured out she better have a car to get around in Phoenix. There was no subway. And when the parking bill came, it was, I think, $120 for the year to park her car. And she thought that was her weekly rate, looking back on her experience at New York City. Jessica's done very good work at a variety of institutions. And she's somebody I would want to have on my team if I was thinking about doing this kind of evaluation or monitoring work.
So I think one of the ground rules is that we won't have any poaching. We're going to keep her, just kidding.
No.
Thank you for saying that, because we adore her. And you're right. I think she's furthered the conversation.
Well, Nicole, I appreciate the conversation. Thank you for bringing it up. I do have a comment in the chat room from my friend Carolyn Harden from NADCP. And she said, we found it helpful to identify what diversity, equity, and inclusion work is being conducted in the local community and provide the teams we are working with this information to help them connect with their community. So that was a comment from Carolyn. All right, anyone else had anything that they wanted to add to the conversation that Nicole brought up? If not, I'm going to call on you for something else. So, okay, let me see. Michelle Miller, hi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for not looking terrified.
It's all a facade.
Any of the 3 questions on the screen you'd like to tackle?
Sure.
Okay, great. Pick which one you want.
So at IAR, in one of our Valor programs in Safe Leo, we're just now starting to tackle the first question of, in what creative ways is your organization using data? And we realized that in all of our trainings that we're delivering across all of our programs is we ask a lot of questions that are Likert scale, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective was this training, or did you like this training? And we always have the open-ended questions. And we realized that's where we're getting the meat of what could make our trainings better or change them, or how we're impacting our law enforcement officers and associates across the country. So what we've started to do is, in addition to the quantitative analysis, is now do qualitative in those open-ended questions and starting to tag common elements, like especially in a COVID world, of the technology, right? Were there technology issues associated with the training, so we don't distract people by they can't hear it or they can't see it, to then also of those impactful speakers and instructors and content. So we're just starting in that realm of taking all of this data that we've stored but haven't necessarily used from just those open-ended questions of what folks are getting out of these trainings, to now start tagging to data to see what those trends are, to then apply, like we do with our bubble sheets of, was this training good or bad, and how much did you like it, to now see what are those really quality components that people are writing in those open-ended question boxes.
And do you find that a large percentage of people are actually responding to the open-ended questions?
Yes, yeah. So I would say is, we always know, right? Whenever you send out a survey or an assessment afterwards, you probably get, maybe 30% if we're lucky. But of those that do respond, they typically do write in those open-ended boxes and really give great feedback normally, both positive and negative, but are pretty open of if they really, really liked it, or if there was something that they really didn't like.
Got it. All right, great. Has anyone else found that to be the case? Anyone else has that experience with their open-ended questions on evaluations? Yes, I see Miss Gunderman is shaking her head.
Yeah, I feel like that's where we truly get what people are getting out of the content or not. I think one of the challenging parts is, what do we do with that collected information once funding is gone for a certain engagement or a certain training program that was developed? Not letting the comments kind of just sit on the shelf and let the program continue to be the way, maybe not the most optimal way it could be delivered, or the most up-to-date content. That's the challenge, is like the funding may be gone. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on how they overcome those challenges, but that's definitely been an ongoing one for us over the years.
Got it. Anyone want to respond to Sheila's issue? Michelle, have you found that to be?
Yes, I would say, especially in some of these more recent trainings, we haven't ended them yet. Thankfully, they're still going strong. So, but that's always in the back of our mind of that same question, Sheila, is with this wealth of knowledge and that training program or that TA program ending, of how do you continue to take those concepts and both within IAR and even with other agencies, of sharing those best practices. So I think that's always, I think, the ongoing struggle is how to apply them immediately, and then that long-term application, whatever that may look like.
Right, thank you. Anyone else want to add to that conversation? Okay, Miss Straight, Abigail, hi, how are you today?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. Any of the questions on the screen that you would have a comment on?
The only thought I had, I was kind of actually to the discussion that you all were just having about training. We're actually doing some right now, and I think something that's really valuable to us, in addition to obviously having the feedback form with the open-ended questions after the training, is the discussion that happens in the room too, right? The kind of questions we get in the room, the kind of like body language from folks, right? I think that's really helpful for us to kind of hear from the people that we're in the training with, to get a sense of what sort of content really resonated with them, what sort of additional questions or information they had about it. I think that's a really valuable place of information for us as well.
I like that. Anyone else find that to be the case? They're finding their in-person, the questions that are being asked in person are valuable? Miss Gregg, anything that you wanted to, Eva, Greg, wanted to add to this conversation?
I would actually like to defer to my colleague, Miss Caroline Lee.
Okay.
I provide TTA for tribal youth programs on TTA 360. So I thought I'd just come and join and listen and learn to hear what you're all doing in your field.
Right. Well, I hope that this has been beneficial for you. Ms. Lee, anything that you wanted to share? Since your colleague threw you under the bus?
Thanks, Eva. I'm reading all the comments and trying to get all caught up here. And we've had so many discussions. Can you rephrase the question? Because we were talking about creative ways that you're using data and the evaluations.
Or we talked about that. We also talked about how your organization defines success of an engagement, or anything you'd like to share.
I thought we were adding on to a topic that we were just discussing, or do I just pick a different one?
Yes, you can do that as well. I'm just trying to put less pressure on you. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
I think we have alternative ways to define success, because, we talk about the process in the beginning where we do the strategic planning, the assessment, the strategic planning, and this process. With our BJA grantees, we don't really have a strategic planning component in our program. We're kind of brand new here at Alaska Tribal Justice Resource Center in Alaska, the TTA providers. And so our data collection methods are kind of in the infant stages, and our evaluations, but determining success, we do different ways. So we don't follow that strategic planning. We kind of let the grantees lead us. What are you working on? What do you need? What are your goals? Staff turnover, we reassess the goals and objectives in their narratives, because sometimes they don't know that, and help them move toward their goals in whatever little ways we can. And we try to give them in little bite-sized chunks, don't overwhelm them with the big strategic plan or the big picture, because then they're overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. So we celebrate successes with the little goals so that they build on them, and they don't really see that they're finishing their deliverables. And it's really great to see that the program comes together.
Great. Well, I think there's nothing wrong with celebrating small victories, right? So every small victory leads to a bigger victory. So I think that's great. Miss Pierce, Barbara, anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I guess in relation to the last question, in terms of defining success of an engagement, is we like to look out beyond the engagement and go back and see what the impact of people involved in the system has been, and also the people that work in the system, and to see how things have changed. So that's sort of what we're focused on now.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to build on that? Miss Malin, Karen, Maline? I'm not sure how to pronounce it, sorry. I saw another Karen out there, so I knew a Karen would want to help a Karen. You're trying to get your voice. All right, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. Ms. Hodges, how are you today, Patty?
Good, thanks so much. I just wanted to build off of that last comment about looking at success. Michelle and I work together at IIR, and I manage the Valor program for BJA. One of the things we really look for, particularly when working at an organizational level, is do they start picking up our resources and using them as their own, right? Do they start using the concepts, the language that we use when we talk about officer safety and wellness, that it's a philosophy, right? It's not just a program. It's about how you do all business, right? Not just certain types of engagements. And so I think we really look at some of those return on investments as how do people internalize what we're sharing in training and TA, and then how do they deliver it then with that sort of common thread of what we're saying and then their own organization. And when you hear them talk about their own then safety and wellness programs, it's awesome to then hear them use, you know, again, our examples, our principles, you know, our resources, attach our video right to their signature block or those types of things. So I think sometimes looking for different return on investments that look a little different than just sort of the standard one has been really helpful in fields that certainly have opportunity to collect sort of more standard outputs and that type of thing, but also look a little bit differently about how they change their behavior and how they're addressing, safety and wellness. So
that must be very gratifying.
It really is, when you hear somebody come up to an instructor that says, I heard your talk, your survivor story talk, 3 years ago at a training, and I'm still living the things you talked about today, or because of what I heard in your class, I've addressed my PTSD, or I started to lose weight and, work out. And, it was great. Just to give a shout out to Baltimore County and Chief Hyatt, they started a walking program, and, pictures of her and her staff out doing their walk. Those kinds of things to me, those are return on investments, and it doesn't take a whole lot of those to say that you're having an impact, where you hear people, comment, I used what you said in a training and someone reached out from my agency and asked for help. I mean, there's something really, really just heartwarming about having that kind of an impact and helping to save, as Director Moore said, one life. That's just, absolutely. It's you got to have the passion to do the work, but it's really heartwarming to hear those stories.
Great. I so appreciate that, Patty. Karen, I see you were able to get off of mute. Hi.
Yeah. Hi. I had my chat open and I couldn't. Okay. First of all, real quick hi to Scott Decker, who I haven't seen in years. So hi, Scott. So I sub for a national TTA provider. And the one thing that we do together is I'm going to jump on that open-ended question bandwagon. Because after you do a webinar or a training or even a national conference, looking back at the comments that people make about this panel was so helpful, or that speaker was so helpful, or what are the other topics that you want to see, and being able to respond to those later, or the next time you plan a webinar or the next time you plan a conference, making sure those speakers are there or that you address the topics that people want to see. Right now, especially since we haven't really been able to meet in person, I think those are the things that either spell success for us to let us know that we did a good job, or at least guide us to what we need to be doing in the future right now.
Great, I love it. Thank you, Karen. All right, we're almost at the end of time. I'm just going to quickly read a couple of comments in the chat from Paige Pressler-Jor. She says, I can say that in one-on-one interactions, which is really the predominant source of engagement for us, success isn't really a data metric. It's 100% visible when the grantee is feeling better about their issues. That relief that they express is what we're hoping for in our interactions. And Pam Rayner said, one thing I would add to what has already been described, when TA recipients begin to teach us or their peers, we know we've experienced the incredible return on the investment of time spent on that TTA. And speaking about TTA and evaluations, this would be a great chance for me to remind you all that you are going to receive an evaluation about today's TTA College. And we really, really hope that you will give us your feedback so we can learn from you and help make our next TTA College even better. So thank you so much for allowing me to call on you and being kind about it. And I really appreciate everyone being present today. You'll see on the screen right now is the contact information for everyone that has spoken here today. And again, please fill out your evaluations. Thank you for your time. Our next TTA College is going to be on August 25th, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you and have a great day.